headlines that are feeding multiple engines of optimism this morning. We mentioned the Pfizer sound with Borla on Squawk Box and this Israeli real-world data. In addition, stimulus bill goes to the president. And although the Lagarde story is a little more choppy, clearly some dry powder over at the ECB having an impact today, too.
Yeah, a lot of different things to keep track of. As you said, you also mentioned claims coming in a bit better than had been anticipated, which is good news. And, of course, Mike, the focus will continue to be on the $1.9 trillion relief bill, as they like to term it, but is pouring an enormous amount of money into the economy. And we've seen GDP numbers stretch into the over 6% range for 2021. What that's going to mean for the stock market, and perhaps as importantly, and certainly linked to it, what it will mean for the bond market continues to be a key focus. Those auctions have suddenly become a focus. I guess the 10-year went okay yesterday. We got a 30-year auction today, I believe, as well.
Yes, we do. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, just that real poor 7-year Treasury auction got everybody clenched up in advance of all the auctions to come. Yesterday was roughly a non-event. Obviously, bond yields sort of calmed down. They've paused here, at least in their march higher. And that's the only real known thing I think people are very concerned about in terms of a side effect of this tremendous growth momentum everybody sees ahead. You know, one of the implications, too, is what it has meant for the path of corporate profits. You know, you can kind of tick off a lot of the things you might have been worried about in the last couple of months, one of which is maybe general valuations look too stretched. Well, actually, the S&P 500 is less expensive on forward earnings than it was in June of last year, 9 months ago, even though the market itself is up, 22% since then, because earnings estimates have come up to that degree. And I think the shakeout that we had is 5% high to low in the S&P. And if you were really concerned about the overheated parts of the market, whether it was SPACs or cloud stocks or all the story stocks or anything, they did get a pretty severe haircut up to 20%. Even semis and software went down that much. So I think it's sort of, the market has kind of regrouped. Sentiment has moderated. And here we are, kind of a whisper from an all-time high crawl in the S&P as well.
Yep, and we'll talk more about the reopening play. There's plenty of news in autos today, mobility and airlines. But this Pfizer data is really interesting. It's a real-world study in Israel, finding that 94% efficacy in preventing asymptomatic infection. As Meg Terrell said earlier this morning, truly astounding numbers. 80% of those tested involved one of the UK variants. You're 44 times more likely, they say, to develop symptomatic COVID if you were not vaccinated. Borla has an open letter. He says that liberation, in his words, is on the horizon. And he elaborated on that with Meg and the gang on Squawk this morning. Here's what he said.
I will tell you in full honesty what I tell to my relatives or my family when they're asking me what to do. And I tell them, if you try to get an appointment for a Pfizer vaccine and the center will give it to you in 2 months and you can get an appointment for another vaccine, J&J, let's say this week, I urge you go and do the J&J vaccine. It's very important.
So the president, David, is going to address the nation tonight on this one-year anniversary of the WHO declaring it a pandemic. The other good news, of course, is the doubling of purchases of the J&J vaccine with the help of Merck. Biden's expected to talk about that. Really, the only wrinkle this morning on the vaccine front is AstraZeneca and these reports of Denmark and Norway halting administration of that vaccine on some fears of blood clots. But we will see. In general, the vaccine trajectory of the news is pretty good today.
It's been a good week, really, when you think about it. I mean, even starting with the antiviral news that we covered earlier in the week, because those will continue to be potentially a very important therapeutic should they be approved. And Merck has actually moved on that. Yesterday, you may have seen Ken Frazier, CEO of Merck, Alex Gorsky, of course, CEO of J&J, talking about their collaboration, their partnership for production. As well, being able to meet those goals in terms of producing that J&J vaccine. And Mike, and then you just get to the basics, which is, I mean, if you're 44 more times likely to develop symptomatic COVID-19 if you don't get a vaccine, one would expect that would be a motivating factor to get one, not to mention 29 times more likely to die from it if you don't get a vaccine. People are getting them, and we can only hope that that pace continues to quicken.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.